звонил спорить, но я честно все свалил, я все знаю.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I am Andrew, aka Anti-Violence Mindgasms, and I'm going to talk about this terrible news that recently happened about quote unquote Putin's brain, aka Alexander Dugin, who's basically Putin's intellectual hero. How his daughter was recently murdered in a car bombing that was intended to murder him, and how a lot of lefties, like progressives, seem to love it. Not all of them. I hate it when people use the term the left or the right as if they all think the same way. But some people I've seen, like the YouTuber Vaush, for example, love it. And some people are disgusted by this, like Lauren Southern, who I disagree with a lot, but I think it's morally reprehensible to be happy about someone dying, even if they do happen to be an awful person. So I'm going to talk about who this woman Daria Dugin is, talk about Alexander Dugin a little bit, and go and examine different reactions to her death by right-wing and left-wing people like Lauren Southern and Vaush. And so let's start off with here. I'm going to just skim through a little bit of the most relevant information in Daria Dugin, who is Alexander Dugin's daughter. And Alexander Dugin he's seen by basically a dangerous fascist or dangerous right-wing reactionary by lefties I respect and trust, like Ben Burgess, but then historians like Thaddeus Russell, who I also trust and respect, who is neither a righty nor a lefty, have interviewed him and interviewed philosophers who are experts in his thoughts like Michael Millerman. And before I knew that some lefties consider him to be a dangerous right-wing reactionary or a dangerous fascist, I thought that his views sounded interesting because they sound similar to postmodernism. And I find postmodern thinkers, or so-called postmodern thinkers, or post-structuralists like Foucault and Derrida, to be very interesting. I'm going to address this comment here. The guy in you show isn't even on the left. You're not one of those people. I'm not on the left, by the way. I thought I mentioned that at the beginning. I'm not on the right or the left, I would say. I would say I'm left-leaning, but I'm not happy about anyone getting killed in a car bomb. I would say TYT and the liberal, especially TYT, the Young Turks, is on the left. The Liberal Democratic Party is on the left too, although some of the politicians in it could be considered right-wingers and are considered right-wingers by progressives, but I've never even heard anyone claim that TYT are not lefties. I don't follow their content closely, but they seem fucking progressive as fuck to me. Anyway, so this is a little bit about Daria Dugina, who recently got killed. So, also known under the pen name Daria Plutoneva, was a Russian journalist and political activist, daughter of Alexander Dugin, far-right political philosopher whose political views and support for Vladimir Putin she shared. She was killed in August 2022 in a car bombing on the outskirts of Moscow. This happened a few days ago, of course, and I don't remember whether it says that in this article or not, but also he, like Alexander Dugin, as I mentioned, is seen as Putin's brain. Basically, he's kind of Putin's intellectual hero. So his traditional conservatism, as people who are charitable to that would describe it, and he supported Putin's invasion of the Ukraine recently too, and she apparently also shares Alexander Dugin's political ideology and supports Putin and supported his invasion of Ukraine. So these are not good things either. But then also it kind of pisses me off when people just act like Russia bad, Ukraine good, or vice versa. Ukraine bad, Russia good. It's more complicated than that. And like I said, even if Alexander Dugin is a fucking dangerous fascist, and even if his daughter was too, I don't think that either of them deserve getting killed in a fucking car bomb. Oh, this guy's talking about Vaush. Daniel, you should try to improve your spelling there a little bit. Dan, your icon is not in left. He's probably a bread tuber. Oh, Vaush? I wouldn't say he's a bread tuber because he criticizes bread tubers a lot. But in my opinion of Vaush is that he's definitely a lefty, but he's way too far left for me sometimes. Like he's talked about how all conservative politicians are, the term he uses is ontologically evil, which means that they're just evil, and he talks about how all roads of conservatism lead to fascism, which is fucking stupid. Like I don't like many aspects of conservatism, but there are plenty of conservative people who are good people, and some of them are better people than people on the left. Yeah, so this guy was talking about Vaush. I would say he definitely, like, I would say critics of him, like Jimmy Dore and Caleb Maupin, call him a bread tuber, but he's not actually a bread tuber. He criticizes. The thing is that it's hard to define what a to determine who a bread tuber even is, because Vaush calls Caleb Maupin a bread tuber, and I've heard Jimmy Dore and Caleb Maupin refer to Kyle Kalinske as a bread tuber, which is fucking ridiculous because he's not even a Marxist or a socialist. He's just a progressive. Oh, that's fair. This guy says here in England, the USA's Liberal Democratic Party is seen to be on the scary end of right-wing politics. That might be true. That's your opinion, I'm saying, but and that could be true, but I'm not sure if you represent the opinion of all people in England. But they're it's probably similar here in Canada in that the Overton window is slightly farther to the left here in Canada and perhaps in the UK than it is in the US. So especially like conservative Democrats, I would say, are more likely to be seen as more right leaning, and which sounds similar to the way it might be in England. Anyway, so let me get back to this here. Daria Dugina was the daughter of Alexander Dugin and his second wife, who is also a philosopher. Alexander Dugin is a famous Russian philosopher. His second wife was Natalia Melentieva. Melentieva. I don't need to know the details about what she studies. Oh, after university, Daria Dugina worked for RT, Russia Today, pro-Kremlin conservative channel. Well, that's what a criticism of it that I've heard. But then I've heard people who, to be fair, mostly have worked for it say that it's not like Russian propaganda. I really don't know what's true about that. I'm just as skeptical of it as any other media news outlet, but I never really followed it that closely either. So Daria, using her pen name Daria Platonova, was affiliated with the International Eurasian Movement and worked for them as a political commentator. Oh, yeah, it does say that here. Outspoken supporter of the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. In particular, she claimed that the war crimes against the Ukrainian civilians by the Russian army during the invasion were staged. Wow, that's some fucking tinfoil hat conspiratorial shit there. She mentioned that the war in Ukraine serves to break the bridges of interaction between Russia and Europe, a struggle between worldviews, end quote. In June 22, she visited occupied Donetsk and Mariupol. On July 4th, 2022, she was sanctioned by the British government, which accused her of being a frequent and high-profile contributor of disinformation in relation to Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine on various online platforms, unquote. She responded by saying that she is an ordinary journalist and should not have been sanctioned. In June, Dugina visited. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know any of those details. Dugina visited the Avovstal plant in Mariupol, where she collaborated with British journalist Graham Phillips, who also worked for the Russian state media. Okay. Do they mean RT again when they're talking about Russian state media? I'm assuming they do. She was killed when her car exploded on Mazayskoye, I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly, Shasa, in the settlement of Bolshia Vyazymy outside Moscow around 9:45 p.m. local time. She was driving to Moscow after attending the annual festival Tradition, which described itself as a family festival for art lovers. The Tradition Festival is held at the Zakharovo estate, approximately 1 kilometer north of Vazyamy. Investigators said an explosive device was planted in the car. It is unclear whether she was targeted deliberately or whether her father, who had been expected to travel with her but switched to another car at the last minute, wasn't the intended target. That's what I've heard people saying, that he was the intended target. And that would make sense because he's like Alexander Putin is known as Putin's brain, and he's a really famous public intellectual. A lot of people probably haven't heard of him, but a lot of people in intellectual circles have heard of him, and his ideas are why I'm interested in him and why I heard about him in the first place. Not that I necessarily agree with all of the bad inclinations of or supposedly bad implications of some of his ideas. Okay. So this is interesting. The Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, so the Russian intelligence, claimed that Ukrainian special services were behind the killing, alleging that they hired a contractor, a Ukrainian national, who escaped to Estonia after the explosion. Now, obviously, it's suspicious for the Russian media to say, or to the Russian intelligence to claim that Ukrainian special services were the one who murdered her, and that might be true, but I'm suspicious due to the source, which doesn't mean that it sure doesn't mean that the FSB is lying about everything they say, but I'm just inherently suspicious of who they say did the bombing. So I'm curious about who actually did and whether it actually was the Ukrainian special services who murdered her. And if I had to guess, I would say it's probably likely that the bomb was intended for Dugin, especially since, at least according to this Wikipedia article, he switched cars at the last minute. Okay, and then, on the day of Dugina's funeral, Putin awarded her with the Order of Courage for courage and selflessness shown in the performance of her professional duty. Okay, so you see Putin's being allied with her and with Alexander Dugin there, of course. When did H.G. Wells said, "When fascism comes back to West, it will come in the form of liberalism." Yeah, what Facilios say? When did Wells say that? Don't but it always settle it as being one of Wells' most famous quotes. Now I want to look that up. When fascism comes back to the West, it will come in the form of liberalism. Did G. Wells say that when G. Wells, liberal fascism, yeah, he talked about fascism. I'm not seeing that quote anywhere here, so I don't know where you heard that quote, but if you have receipts, then I will believe you, but I'm not going to assume that you're not telling the truth either. I'm just going to remain ambiguous or agnostic about it. You don't know where it came from, but it always said to be one of Wells' most famous quotes. I've never heard it before, and I'm a big fan of H.G. Wells. But anyway, so let's go into, now I'm going to go into Michael Millerman, the philosopher who is, he's studied Alexander Dugin a lot and translated a lot of his work from Russian to English. So I'm going to go a little bit into him explaining just a little bit about Alexander Dugin on one of my favorite historian, Thaddeus Russell's podcast, who was one of the first people I heard about people like Foucault from, and is one of the main reasons I started studying Foucault.
Here in 2014, I was invited onto Canadian TV to give an interview on Putin's brain. So 2014 is when Russia-Ukraine was last a hotspot. Okay, that's when you had the war in Eastern Ukraine and Donbass and all of that. And I was working on Dugin, and I was invited to give an interview on Ontario TV in Canada. Okay, but it was the only time that anybody had in a televised forum explained the Russian perspective without all kinds of liberal distortions. And so the clip went viral, you know. But I think, like, I mean, for this kind of topic, it was viral. Like over 100,000 people have watched it by now. And after that interview, I got called into many offices and I got many a finger wagging, and I had 4 professors resign from my dissertation committee, and I was accused of being a Russian agent. And I was told, you know, I'd never work in this town again, that kind of thing. And people tried to sabotage my funding. And basically there was a big blowback. And that blowback lasted for several years, as I barely managed to finish my PhD because there was a war against me. And you know how these things go.
I do.
But people were not keen on having, you know, the amazing thing is that professors, and you know such professors, and your listeners know such professors and such people who pride themselves on diversity, on otherness, on studying the other, as long as it's the right kind of other. As soon as you study the wrong kind of other, namely a Russian conservative, who, as you know, you spoke to him, he's other, right? Oh yeah, he's very other, but he's the wrong kind of other. So if you go there, right-wing anti-liberalism, Russian conservatism, German conservative revolution, that is the wrong kind of other. All the tolerance for diversity goes out the window, and all the apparatus of repression and reputation destruction and everything else you can think of goes into high gear.
Yeah, I would say so. If we're talking about the woke ideology or wokeness or whatever, I would say that when they talk about diversity, they're just talking about diversity in terms of physical appearance and sexuality, like in terms of your skin color or your gender, and whether you're like gay, straight, trans, or whatever. Yeah, they really don't seem to care about intellectual diversity. Conservative thinkers are dangerous. And I find radical and people who supposedly have dangerous thoughts to be interesting, because I want to know why their thoughts are so interesting. So all this shit makes me want to more thoroughly research Alexander Dugin's thought, not because I'm going to become a fucking proponent of it or anything like that, but I want to find out what he was saying that people think is so dangerous. And oh yeah, Vasilios said, in relation to that H.G. Wells comment about how he supposedly said that when fascism comes back to the West, it will be in the form of liberalism. Vasilios said, as because what liberalism is changes with the context, Milton Friedman is a proponent of liberalism in a more classical sense. Would he think I cut out for a second there. Yeah, that's totally true. That's a good point about Milton Friedman, because a lot of people know him, and I mainly know him as a libertarian. He's one of the chief proponents of what people today call libertarians. But if you actually look at the work of people like Milton Friedman and von Hayek and von Mises and people who the anarcho-capitalists reference often, the Austrian economists, a lot of them actually sound a lot like neoliberals in their books if you read what they've written. Okay, anyway, I'm going to go now to just Lauren Southern's tweet in reaction to Lefties rejoicing about Alexander Dugin's daughter Daria Dugino or Dugin getting murdered. And this is one of few occasions on which I actually agree with Lauren Southern. She is a white supremacist, and I think 90% of her views are morally reprehensible, or not necessarily morally reprehensible, but I at least thoroughly disagree with him. I find her white supremacy to be morally reprehensible. But anyway, she said in her tweet that's gone viral and has been really popular, and I think Vaush mentions this in his video that I'll get to. A whole lot of cowards celebrating the murder of Alexander Dugin's daughter tonight on Twitter. Pathetic, showing your true colors, the lot of you. I don't know if it would mean that you're showing your true colors necessarily. It depends on what that means, though, I suppose. But yeah, like I said at the top of this, even if Alexander Dugin and his daughter are terrible fascists and they have dangerous ideas, and I mean, it sounds like they both supported Putin's invasion of Ukraine, which I agree is a fucking terrible thing to support. I still don't think that anyone like that should be. I wouldn't be happy about anyone like that killed in a car bomb. I mean, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't lose a fucking wink of sleep if Putin himself got killed in a car bomb, because I think he's a fucking terrible, evil person. But I wouldn't be happy about it either, in the same way that I wasn't happy when Osama bin Laden got killed, even though he was a fucking terrible person too. But anyway, I'm going to get into Vaush's reaction to this in his video now. And he is one of those lefties who is literally happy about Alexander Dugin's daughter, Daria Dugina. I think I'll just go with Dugin, because I forget whether she said Dugino or Dugina there. But I'm going to go through his reaction and basically criticize his fucking hardcore rejoicing about her getting murdered.
So Alexander Dugin is one of the top aides to Vladimir Putin. He's like a kind of an fascist, and he's the actual like pinnacle of what Nazbol means.
I forgot to mention, he kind of reminds me of, the intellectual behind the revolutionary, like Lenin or Trotsky with Stalin or someone like that, or like Che Guevara behind Fidel Castro, like the intellectuals behind revolutionary leaders like that.
Okay, how do I put this? Okay, you know how in media you'll have a supervillain who is basically Hitler, but then when you fight through their minions and get to the top of the gigantic castle dragon they've built in the sky for the final showdown with them, and they're doing their like villain monologue, they explain that they're not actually like interested in racial bias or anything like that, that they actually want to unify all the world under a single flag so people may finally live in peace and harmony, and they want to return to tradition so they can abandon alienating modernity and allow people to live. That's Dugin, okay? Alexander Dugin claims to not...
Well, it doesn't sound like that's that accurate of a description of his ideology, but somewhat accurate. But if, I mean, obviously if he's a Nazi, that's fucking terrible. If he's a globalist, I'm skeptical of that. But if you're skeptical, like the aspects of his philosophical ideology that interest me are being a critique of liberalism and modernity. And I'm interested in that because I like postmodernists or post-structuralists like Foucault and Derrida, and I like them because of their critique of modernity. And I'm interested in critiques of liberalism for similar reasons. But I'm interested in all kinds of different political ideologies. I like studying classic anarchists like Bakunin and Kropotkin and Emmett Goldman. I like studying classical liberal thinkers like Locke, for example, and classical conservative thinkers like Thomas Paine and Alexis de Tocqueville. Those are American conservatives. And I just like studying different political ideologies and learning about flaws in them too. And I mentioned before, for example, you can go all the way back to Plato's book, The Republic, with this, with Socrates talking about how democracy was the tyranny of the majority. But I'm not an anarchist either, partially because his alternative was like a committee of philosopher kings, as if we can have these actual people who are brilliant geniuses, who are well read and know how to make the right decisions. I think that's basically borderline impossible too. Yes, I agree. Vaush has said loads of out of order, completely sick things. I agree. Even though I find him to be an interesting person, he gets way too fucking hyperbolic for me sometimes.
To not be racist, and is rather in favor of a kind of pan-ethnic Eurasian empire. The line with him is not. I guess I should say that like the ways in which he reps for fascism are distinctly different from the ways in which most Westerners rep for fascism. Here's what he.
I had to mute through these fucking ads. Yeah, it sounds like he's saying he's a Nazi too, and according to other people I've heard criticize him, I haven't heard them say that he's a Nazi, but I've heard like Ben Burgess say that he's some sort of dangerous fascist or right-wing reactionary, and I don't know about that's different from a Nazi, although.
As we can see,
although some people like the critical theorists who I've talked about before, like Habermas and who were the people who, or Adorno and Horkheimer, who wrote the Dialectic of Enlightenment, they basically see fascism and Nazism as the same thing. Like when they talk about fascism in their book, The Dialectic of Enlightenment, they're talking about specifically the Nazis during World War II. All right.
The low T soy boy, unimpressive, but you know.
Go ahead,
There we
Mr.
go.
Trump. In Trump we trust.
Meet the man who has been dubbed Putin's brain.
I didn't even know that he was a fan of Trump.
Conservative philosopher and TV personality Alexander Dugin is a champion of Russian nationalism, and he says President Trump is on the same wavelength.
As long
Yeah, I don't like Trump and I don't like nationalism either.
as I could.
That was great. In all seriousness, this is actually a big deal. Dugin is like is essentially the premier philosopher behind Putin's regime, and the strongest ideological advocate for the principles of pan-Eurasianism and Russian nationalism. Basically, he takes Russian nationalism and all the militarism loaded behind it, and he justifies it in a kind of pseudo-humanitarian, realpolitik. The only way to prevent fighting is to become a hegemon, and the only way to become a hegemon is through this glorious, like, ethnically homogenous, or sorry, ethnically heterogeneous, like ultra empire. I think he also does do the actual like return to tradition stuff, right? Like literally, I think he's spoken positively of feudalism in the sense of like we would be better off if we lived in that environment. He really commits to the bit, you know. You know who else committed to the bit? His daughter, pictured somewhere in this photo of a flaming car. Yeah, somebody tried to car bomb Alexander Dugin and caught his daughter instead. Don't feel bad. His daughter's just as bad. She is a journalist.
I'm skeptical of this article he's going through because it came from the Daily Beast, and they're basically like a tabloid. Some of what they say is true, but a lot of it is not that well researched when they publish it.
Who reps his ideology and promotes fascist ideology for the Russian state. She's a state operative.
Wait, also, I don't know if he just misspoke there because he talks about how Dugin is supposedly a white nationalist or racist or something, but a few seconds ago he said ethnically heterogeneous when he was talking about his ideology, and that would be ethnically mixed, which would be the opposite of being a white supremacist or racist. But maybe he just misspoke there and meant the opposite of that. Okay, I'm going to address this comment again here. I also am not a Trump fan, but the Liberal Democratic Party and the Rhino Globalists and the Republican Party are infinitely times worse. No, that's not fucking true. Give me your reasons for this. That's the Liberal Democratic Party. I don't like the Liberal Democratic Party or who the fuck in the Republican Party are globalists? I don't know about that. Or maybe the Democrats and the Republicans are globalists, but I sure as fuck don't think they're infinitely worse. I don't think they're that much better, but I think they're slightly better. So you're gonna have to give me a hell of a lot of reasons for such a hyperbolic claim. That sounds like as just as hyperbolic as Vaush, but in the opposite direction. Yeah, and Russia said that it was Ukrainian intelligence. So, I mean, I don't know who to believe. Like, I don't trust either Ukrainian or Russian intelligence. And I mean, I trust Wikipedia more than both of them. But Wikipedia said the opposite of that. And I mean, who the fuck are you supposed to believe in this situation? I have no idea who killed Alexander Dugin's daughter yet. Okay, I'm going to address this comment again here too. This is not true. You're wrong about this person in the comments. One example, he's talking about the Democrats are way more war hawk like compared to Trump. Like Obama started his time with 2 wars and went to loads more. Yeah, you know, that's also phenomenally hyperbolic. You sound just like Vaush in that way, except in the opposite political direction, as I said, because they are not way more war hawkish. Trump continued every single war that had already been started when he was in office and expanded some of them. The only good thing he did in terms of war is the only good thing that Biden did in terms of war, which is that Trump started the peace deal with Afghanistan and Biden fulfilled that. That's the only good thing that either of them did in terms of war. So Trump was a huge war hawk too. It's not as if there's that much of a difference at all between him and the standard Democrats and standard Republicans. Yeah. Yeah, that's something similar. If he's such an intellectual inspiration for Putin that he's being called Putin's brain, then you would think, just from a strategic perspective, not from a moral perspective at all, you would think that it would make strategic sense to try to kill Alexander Dugin if he's helping Putin so much intellectually. And this person, oh, I forgot to re-screen share that, but also, by the way, I know you realize that I'm on the left. You're on the left, but you think the Democrats and Republicans are way worse and way more war hawkish than Trump. It doesn't sound that way. That, well, you said you're not a Trump fan, but they're way worse. That I don't see how that's the case at all. Anyway, I forgot to re-screen share this, so here it is.
Explanation that it might have been like a moderate in job as a way of trying to like pull power away. Not very moderate to murder someone. Yeah, by moderate here I mean they don't want Putin to drag the world into nuclear war. I don't mean moderate as in like the American like Democrat moderate type. You know,
moderate on the Russian hegemonic end of the spectrum, presumably.
Slightly less insane would be the would be the driver there. Interesting stuff. Won't this make it worse? Dugin was spared, his daughter was killed. It's difficult to say. Could go a lot of directions, a lot of ways. It's obviously an inside job. The CCTV in the parking lot where a car was before the bombing were not working. Is that true? They disabled the CCTV beforehand? Well, there are ways you could do that without it being like an inside job. We'll wait on details. I don't want to speculate too much about a conspiracy or a plot.
Yeah,
because
neither.
I know like nothing about this. I mean, like we don't. That's.
I gotta mute these fucking ads again. Yeah, I don't know about that whole conspiratorial aspect about the CCD camera being turned off either. I have no idea whether that's true, so that could be total bullshit. Here we go.
It was a planned assassination. We don't know that much, so I don't want to run off here. Yeah, here. Daria Dugina has been outspoken in her support of Russia's war against Ukraine, as evidence began to pile up in April of Russian war crimes in the Kiev suburb of Bucha. Dugina argued in an interview the slaughter of civilians had been staged, bizarrely claiming the U.S. had chosen the city because in English the name sounds like butcher. She was also sanctioned by the U.S. government in March in connection with her role in a Kremlin-run influence.
Yeah, that's some fucking tinfoil hat conspiratorial bullshit.
Just to let you guys know, like this, like,
and Wikipedia said that too, right? Which still doesn't mean it's objectively true, but if that's, it sounds like it is true, and that's some fucking tinfoil hat bullshit.
She was fully in it, you know. As far as I'm concerned, ideologically, this is equivalent to like a propagandist for the German government getting murked after they invaded Poland. I'm not going to shed a single fucking tear over this, you know. In loving memory of Daria.
There's a difference between not shedding a tear over it and being happy about it. He mentioned that earlier, and he clearly seems to be happy about this, which is fucking morally reprehensible to me.
She is a true Russian girl, Bushilin wrote. So true. Ukraine denied involvement in the bombing. Ukraine clearly has nothing to do with yesterday's bombing because we are not a criminal state like the Russian Federation, even more so not a terrorist state. Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak.
Of course he would say winking.
That. See how big mad this bitch is? Oh yeah, I saw Lauren Southern. Of course, like fascists.
There's her tweet.
Like fascists may be nationalists, generally speaking, but fascists have always prioritized fascism over nationalism.
Was that tweet I showed earlier, right? Lauren Southern saying a lot of cowards, and again, I think Lauren Southern is a white supremacist and a terrible person, and not only that, she has a lot of conservative positions that I just disagree with. But she said a whole lot of cowards celebrating the murder of Alexander Dugin's daughter tonight on Twitter. Pathetic, showing your true colors, a lot of you. And like I said, that's one of very few times when I actually agree with Lauren Southern for the most part. But Vaush disagrees and think it's a good thing, apparently.
You know what I mean? Like, don't you guys think it's kind of weird how Germany was all like Aryan supremacy, and then they ally with Italians who are black and the Japanese who are Japanese, and then like they get along there, and then like instantly the German government and their scientists have to make a bunch of apologetics and explanations. You know what I mean? You understand what I mean, right? Authoritarians in one country tend to get along with authoritarians in other countries. So like Trump gets along with Bolsonaro, gets along with Boris Johnson. I mean, like there tends to be sort of like a unifying element there, even if they're isolationist.
Maybe they admire each other's power.
Just authoritarians tend to like authoritarians. They get along. All employees working in Ukraine's capital government quarter have now been told to work from home this whole week, according to Ukrainska Pravda. The Ukrainians are concerned about retaliation. So they're having all their employees work from home so that if anyone bombs the government building, it doesn't take out any innocents.
That's probably good. Again, I am against political violence. Like I said, and I called myself anti-violence mindgasms for this. All right, so yeah, that's obviously some terrible news. Perhaps admittedly awful person got killed, and like I said, I don't know that she was actually an awful person. That's what I've heard from some people. Other people disagree. I'm not that familiar with her work. But even if, for the sake of argument, Alexander Dugin's daughter Daria was an awful person, and it sounds like she had some opinions that I think are terrible, such as supporting Putin's invasion of Russia and being pro-Putin. I think those are generally bad things. But even if she is like a fucking dangerous fascist or some shit like that, I don't think she deserves to be murdered in a car bombing. And yeah, so obviously, and this kind of disgusts me too. This whole thing has been just as politicized as everything else lately. It seems like a lot of lefties are happy about her getting murdered in a fucking car bombing, and a lot of conservatives don't like it. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if the sort of situation were reversed. If I don't know, if a really Ukrainian anti-Russian person got killed, that some like pro-Putin authoritarian right-wingers would be happy about it, and then lefties would hate it or something like that. That everything is way too politicized to the left or the right nowadays. But anyway, so that's some terrible news, and it's disgusting the way people are reacting to it. So I hope you like my little examination of what happened, the details, and what people are thinking about it, along with the supposedly dangerous thoughts of people like Alexander Dugin. So click that like button on this video, share it everywhere, subscribe to the channel, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. I'm probably soon going to do one on this book by George R.R. Martin, who of course is the author of Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones and Fire and Blood / House of the Dragon. And it's his book that he published in the 80s, which is about vampires. So that was really a really interesting book that I recently read. So I'm probably going to talk about that soon. And then this weekend, probably going to do a podcast with Chris and Dusty, who I often do podcasts with. We're either going to talk about House of the Dragon, the first episode. I think maybe only the first episode is out now. I'm not sure if there's a second episode out yet, but we'll probably talk about the first episode or two of that. We'll either talk about that or a documentary that I've been meaning to discuss with them called Reversing Roe, which is about the decades-long process of evangelical Christian groups like the so-called moral majority pressuring Republicans to do an endless series of legislation, which gradually led to the overturning of Roe versus Wade recently in the U.S. And so check out those. And like I always say, thanks for watching. Oh yeah, also check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video as always. And if you give me $10 a month, you can vote on future topics, books, and movies that I will discuss both by myself and with others. And oh, I appreciate both of you guys, Vasilios and I don't know how to pronounce your name in the comments there, Shispers, commenting, said, here in England, the Labour Party more globalist and right-wing compared to the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is less globalist. And, okay, that's interesting. Don't Keir Starmer to be PM. I don't know who that is. I don't know anything about British politics, really. All the media and establishment want him, apparently. Okay. Anyone else from Britain, if you're watching this, let me know your thoughts as well about this in the comments. First time your channel, don't have the same views. We'll be coming back, though. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your comments. All right. So, yeah, also, as I always say at the end of my videos, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And don't support people getting murdered in car bombings, even if you think they're fucking awful people. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And check out upcoming videos, and let me know your thoughts on this terrible news in the comments. All right. Thanks again, everyone, and adios until next time.